from FingerLakes1.com. This is the Debrief Podcast. I'm Josh Durso, and normally we spend this hour each week talking about the headlines, breaking down the latest headlines. We're going to be doing that today, but we're going to take a little bit of focus and a little bit of time to talk about Geneva, New York. I am joined today by Jim Meaney, founder of the Geneva Believer, alternative news and views from the city. Jim, thanks for coming back.
Thanks for having me on again, Josh.
All right, let's start with Ward 6. Obviously, you yourself were actually in some of the headlines. You announced that you were running for Ward 6 and then shortly thereafter ended your campaign. Walk us through what that process looked like for you, why you ran, and then also why you decided to end your campaign.
Okay, well, to begin with, I ran because I felt like I was a good candidate for Ward 6. I've been involved in a lot of things going on in the Ward 6 community. I have a good working knowledge of some of the issues, some of the things that people are facing, and I felt like I would be a strong candidate. In February, I met with the Democratic Committee. The interviews, I believe, went well. I followed up with some of the committee members afterwards. I had a good amount of support, and I had some other folks who were a little concerned about the perception of me and from the blog.
Right.
One member called me a controversial figure, which was, I guess, a nice way of putting it. So it was. It was kind of up in the air at that point. I finished out the interview, some follow-ups, and I was told that they were still going to probably look into interviewing a few more people. But I was also told at the time that they were having a hard time finding anyone else. They had a couple of people they had asked who turned it down. Eventually, so that was kind of where it was standing, and then the Ward 6 counselor, John Greco, passed away. That changed the whole situation, I believe, as far as my chances of getting getting the endorsement from the committee. So the committee then, I then touched base with the committee, and they said, well, we've been more actively looking for other people, and they were honest with me. They said, we don't think that this current council would be able to get the 5 votes that you need to be appointed on this current council. You need 5 out of the 8 votes from the remaining councilors. So they began interviewing other people, and I was unaware that they had been. When I declared my candidacy, I was unaware that they were going to interview Juanita Akins, who's not only a friend of mine, but someone who I feel very strongly would be a fantastic representative in Ward 6. She's embedded in the community. She's been working in the community for years. Go to my website. You can see her bio is there, and I'm sure it'll pop up in other places as well. She's very well qualified, and someone I would be honored to have as our Ward 6 counselor. So I announced my candidacy, and also said that if I didn't get the endorsement, I would run in the primary. Then when I found out that Juanita had gotten the endorsement, I said, okay, well, I'm just gonna step aside. I was also interested in running as an at-large candidate, but that didn't work. That's a whole other story. I'd probably do a whole podcast on why that didn't work out. I did let the Democratic Committee know I was interested in an at-large position, but they decided to endorse a couple other folks. So I did a week ago, or actually I officially just a few days ago stepped out of the race. So
I want to touch on the controversial figure part of this conversation a little bit more. Expand on that a little bit for people who might not be as connected to Geneva and might not understand what you've been doing for the last, what is now 4 or 5 years. Covering the city and sort of being the watchdog of the city.
Well, that's exactly it. I've written a lot of articles. I've done a lot of research and investigations into conflicts of interest, things going on behind the scenes with the city and a lot of it has made city officials look bad, including individual counselors that are seated right now. And my blog is it's very fact based. I don't post rumors. I make sure that every bit of information that I post is vetted or documented. But at the same time, there are times when I'm a little confrontational with the blog, more than a little confrontational. Sometimes there's a little sarcasm and snark in there that people find that can rub people the wrong way, especially when you're in a small city. There's personalities involved. People seem to cross their understanding of there's the people who are sitting in the seat, and then there are also elected officials. So a couple of the things that I was told by members of the committee was that they were concerned that because of the confrontational nature of the blog, that I was going to be, I might lose my temper and start screaming at people or something. That was one thing I was told. And I assured them, and I explained to them that I understand how it works within that framework. I can sit on a blog and write about things and throw my opinions out and tell people, here's the facts and here's what it all means. But as a counselor, I would have to be, more open to discussions, and I'm not going to make silly memes of people, and I'm not going to insult my fellow counselors. So there was some concern. They told me there was concern about that. They said that they felt that there were two Jim Meaneys. There was the Jim Meaney who founded the Jim Meaney who founded Geneva Night Out a few years back and has done other things in the community and, can sit and have a adult conversation. And then there's the other Jim Meaney who's, too unpredictable to sit on city council and might cause embarrassment.
How did that, as a person in the news, listening to that, one, that's really disheartening. Two, it almost feels like at that point it seems or feels like the committee isn't doing the work of the people after all. In that they're looking for something specific, they're looking for something that might be a little hollowed out, they're looking for something that they can perhaps control. Was that a little bit, what did that feel like, sort of going through that process, living through that process? First I did have support from a number of people on the committee, and they understood that I could do the job and I could do it well, and I could represent the people well, and that my reasons for running and my passion for Ward 6 are apparent from what I've been doing for the past few years. But my own personal feelings is that a number of questions that came to me had to do with unity. Would I be able to, unify behind the Democratic slate? What would happen if I had an idea about something while on council and nobody agreed with me? And I was very candid and said that, I believe that this city council in this city is not transparent enough. And they said, well, what if something's in executive session? I said, well, if it's supposed to be an executive session, then that's fine. But if I don't believe it's supposed to be, I'm going to challenge it, and I'm going to look into it further and get information to people, because that's what I believe in strongly, is that the more transparency you have, the less chance there is of corruption and problems. And I think that might have rubbed some of them the wrong way. There's committee members who have lived in Geneva their whole lives, and they're involved with all kinds of organizations and things within the workings of the city, and my gut feeling is that's what made them more nervous than this excuse that I was going to fly off the handle and start screaming at people and embarrass everyone. So it's interesting that you mentioned the executive session item as one of the examples, because executive session, if you look at local boards and city councils tend to be no exception to the rule, you tend to see a lot of government boards going into executive session for very, we'll call them gray area reasons, meaning it isn't quite fully hashed out why they're going in, when they're going in. And it doesn't really feel like, with a lot of boards that I've covered myself, you don't always have the most confidence that the things they're saying they're going in to talk about are actually the items that are going to be talked about. And it's fascinating that you took that approach with that, because there aren't really any checks and balances within to make sure that the things that are being discussed in executive session are staying within the initial bounds of why they went into it. As I have to ask, the reporter in you, was that a little kind of like, well, what? Like, did that take you back a little bit?
To be honest, not really. I've seen the way that things work in the city, and I've seen how little response I've gotten from city council and from city officials when it comes to questioning executive session. I expected them to try to find reasons why I wouldn't be a good candidate.
So one other item within the whole philosophy behind maybe why you weren't the right candidate through their eyes. General question: how much of the reporting, if you were going to sort of guess and take a percentage figure stab at it, how much of the reporting on your blog is derived directly from FOIL requests, meaning information directly coming from the city?
FOIL requests, it's probably a smaller percentage than you might think. I mean, I would say maybe 30% of the content of my blog over the past few years. But I mean, I would say it's more like 90% is the information that I that's out there available for everyone to see.
And that's the point I was kind of driving towards, because it seems like the stuff you're putting out there is not salacious, controversial stuff. You perhaps there's a little, like you said, snark embedded in it, but looking at this reporting compared to reporting of tough topics in any publication at all, it falls in line with good journalism, and it's kind of interesting that might have been a sticking point for them.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, because that's what I've always felt, that I'm giving people mostly information that's already out there. I do have some anonymous sources, but that's a very small percentage of the broader scope of what I'm working on. So they're it could be certainly seen that they don't like the idea that I'm spotlighting things that are already there that people aren't looking closely enough at.
I think that means you have to keep doing it. So let's talk about what the plan is, or what the plan seems to be for Ward 6 now moving forward. There isn't going to be an appointment before the election this fall?
Well, it's nobody really knows at this point. It's something that you had discussed with Jackie Augustine on the last debrief, and something I've been writing about is that city council, along with help from a couple of members of the Democratic Committee, are being pressured from different directions to not endorse or to not appoint Juanita Akins. Juanita was endorsed unanimously by the Democratic Committee, but now there are at least two counselors who were pushing against appointing her, and the reason for this would be the real reason, I believe, is that she's very active in the community in terms of fighting for justice, calling out issues with the justice system and the Geneva Police Department. To me, that's the real reason underlying everything. But their cover story is supposedly going to be that they want to that Councilor Grieco's wishes would have been to appoint someone else, and that it would be a way to honor his legacy to leave the seat open until January. It makes no sense to me. The cover story, I mean, it doesn't. I don't understand how they believe that they could sell that to the people of Ward 6 and to the people of Geneva. And I'm hearing that maybe one of the two counselors who were going to try to push for this plan may have decided that they will vote to appoint Juanita Akins. But at this point, we're not going to know until the agenda for the city council meeting comes out in May, and we see whether or not the appointment is on the agenda.
It's really, really interesting. You touched on it a little bit, and Jackie really talked about this at length during our last episode, but it seems it doesn't pass the sniff test to believe that anyone's interest or anyone's concern for a community would be less representation. And isn't that the result of this plan for Ward 6 as it sits right now? That's exactly what the result would be. You can't expect at-large counselors to take up the slack. You can't leave the most vulnerable population in the city. Vulnerable populations are in Ward 6. It's the lowest income. It's the highest percentage of people of color. It's there's a lot of challenges and a lot of things going on where people do need to have someone to represent them. I find it to be incredibly offensive. I believe that they're doing. I want to say I can't believe they would do it, but I do believe that they're doing it because, as I've pointed out for the past 3 years, and it's only been the past 3 years that I've been pointing these things out, and I know people who've lived in Ward 6 for decades, and it's the same story year after year. It's that the rest of the city doesn't care about Ward 6, and this is something that they think they can get away with because it's Ward 6. Jackie alluded a little bit to that her belief was that it was primarily due to the demographics of that particular ward. What do you think is more at play? The theory about what could possibly be intention in terms of oversight for public safety versus what the demographics are of that community and what perhaps some counselors feel they can sort of let go. It's just that ward. Everything will be fine.
I don't know if one weighs more than the other. I think that the issue of oversight of public safety that's what's driving it. But the fact that it's Ward 6, the fact that it's people that some counselors may feel aren't going to be able to fight back or aren't going to be able to fight for their own representation. I would say it's a little bit of both.
So obviously this is going to be a big election for the city of Geneva. Busy local election year generally. What do we know about the slate of potential candidates? Obviously you published the full slate about a week or a week and a half ago. Walk us through what we know about the candidates so far, and if there are any, more importantly, if there are any that sort of stand out to you as either interesting races or interesting candidates.
Well, there's only two current councilors that are running again in the next election. Ken Cameron in the 4th Ward is running for re-election, and Steve Valentino is the 3rd Ward councilor, is going to run for mayor. So there's a lot of new faces, a lot of people who are getting into the political world for the first time. So that makes it really interesting. I think the mayoral race is going to be really interesting because Mark Pittifer is running as the Republican. From what I understand, he's a no mark on his as a voter, so he's not he's not a lifelong Republican. He was asked by the Republican Party, and the feedback I'm getting from the community in Ward 6, he's a very popular candidate. He grew up in Ward 6. He knows the families. He used to go to people's houses for dinner and play with all the kids. He was on the same sports teams, and he's very well liked in the city. And just some of the some of the social media responses I've seen to his candidacy have been, really positive in terms of how much people know him and how much people want to vote for him. And Steve Valentino, he's been around council for many years. But he's always been supportive of. I just try to think of the things that I can remember that he really stands for. I know that bringing new contemporary ideas for economic development in the city, helping downtown, keeping the lakefront not developed. But Steve's going to be, there's going to be I would like to see him answering a lot more questions and talking a lot more about what his plans are for the city, and that's going to be an interesting race. And also the at-large race. The Democratic candidates are Tamara Cataldo, who ran for county supervisor a couple of years ago. She's active in the community with a number of different kinds of organizations and things like that. The other candidate, Anthony Noon, he's a mystery to me. I don't know a lot about him or a lot of people that really know him. I guess his family's from Geneva. He didn't live here for a while, and now he's living here again. But everyone's telling me he's going to be an interesting, exciting candidate. But on the other side with the Republicans, there's Ben Vasquez, who is a Waterloo police officer, and there's Frank Gaglianis, who also ran for county supervisor, but he's also an employee of Massa Construction, which adds another layer of making that race very interesting, because in the past couple of years, Massa there have been a lot of people looking into what Massa and Massa's relationship with the city. Gordy Eddington, fighting for Massa contracts while on council. So that's going to be, I think that's going to be a really interesting race.
What do you think, with as many new faces as it seems will be coming up, with as many new faces coming into the picture, what do you think the top issues, so to speak, are going to be that they're going to focus on? I guess less. This question might be less about what voters might be concerned about, and more about what you think as candidates they may end up pushing toward or trying to work toward.
Well, just judging from the way the last election went, a lot of times, or at least the last time, there's not always a lot of real discussion about a lot of issues. Usually, people talk about the lakefront, people talk about downtown, people talk about taxes. So I'm sure that those three issues will be things that are touched upon by a lot of the candidates. But I also think that the issues with the police department, that's going to be coming up. I don't know if that's going to race to the top to be one of the big issues that everyone talks about. The lakefront is, I think that's going to come back around again, because there are candidates who are strong proponents of developing at least part of Lakefront Park, and there are other candidates who are strongly against it. I would like to see more discussion of Lakefront Park and what the candidates' ideas really are on that issue, because without having to stand in front of the public or answer really specific questions, like specifically what do you believe on these issues, it ends up the candidates can kind of slide by, and it ends up being more of a popularity contest. But what I would love to see is more specific questions, more specific discussions about issues like those.
Is developing the lakefront property, going to be one of those talking points that pops back up on the radar?
It's been apparently it's been one of those talking points for the past 20 years. So I'm sure that it's going to come back around again. especially with, like I said, there have been some candidates who have been vocal proponents of developing the park, and and there are others who are not. And it's part of what my platform that I was going to run on council was to address this issue once and for all. If it's not going to be developed, then let's change the zoning. Let's put it in a land trust. Let's figure out how to keep it a park. If that's not going to be the case, let's just get it over with, because it's something that just kind of hangs out there year after year, and people argue about it, people fight about it, and let's just get it over with once and for all.
So, obviously, with any kind of turnover on a board or city council, you lose institutional knowledge. Jackie talked a little bit the last time we were here about what that means, what the implications of that are. From your perspective, what's the big loss to the community if you do have a scenario where, say, 4 or 5 new council members take those seats on January 1?
Well, I mean, there's going to be a learning curve for those people, but it's also an opportunity to bring some fresh eyes to what's going on in council. And I know that there's a handful of candidates. Juanita Akins is one, Tamara Cataldo, Laura Salamandra. They're all, they all have big questions about the way things are run. I hear stories about when somebody first gets on city council, the veteran councilors, put their arm around them and say, well, here's kind of the way we do things. And I think it's an opportunity to, maybe not have as many of those, quiet conversations like, we don't really do things that way, and get some new ideas and get some people in there who say, well, just because we've done it this way all along doesn't mean we can't do it a different way.
So you had a really great story about police accountability.
Mm-hmm.
You've been covering the city's effort to create a board for probably like the last year and a half-ish.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to us a little bit about where that stands right now and what some of the challenges are, roadblocks that it's running into.
All right, well, where it's at right now, it's difficult to find out exactly what's going on with the community compact, because they're not really a public body. So whatever kind of plans and whatever kind of things they're doing, the only way to really find out is to show up at their monthly meetings and watch, or to go through the minutes from their meetings. So I've been going through the minutes. It seems that at this point, members of the compact are looking to create some kind of what they would call a civilian review board or a citizen review board or a community review board. But the organizations that they're getting their mentoring from for creating one of these oversight boards are the civilian review board people in Schenectady, New York, and Rochester. Schenectady it's not a popular. It's not well received in the community. The community has a lot of questions about it. It doesn't have any sort of oversight of the police in terms of discipline, subpoena power. It's more of a oversight board in name only. Same thing in Rochester, where it has been such a failure that the Rochester City Council is going to be voting on creating one of the most transparent and community-powered oversight boards in the country, where they will be able to mete out discipline for officers who engage in misconduct, and will be able to investigate, have subpoena power to investigate these kind of situations. So what's concerning is that the community compact, which is, nothing happens in the community compact without the approval of the chief of police. I'm skeptical that the police department wants to give up any of their power in the city. So there seems to be a push for the compact to put in some sort of community review board, which may cost the taxpayers money, which will only be a review board in name only. It's not going to have any kind of real effect on police misconduct.
So, moving forward, what's sort of the forecast on it? Seems like it's still a very sort of malleable thing right now. When could residents or those who are watching this sort of expect perhaps some movement? Are we talking maybe summer, or is there not even like a timeline on this thing yet?
Well, again, because the community compact is really not transparent, it's hard to gauge it. From what I'm hearing, because it is an election year, that some of the counselors are going to say, "Oh yes, we love this new, proposal to have this oversight. The community's been asking for it, and we're going to put it through." So my gut feeling is that sometime in the next couple of months, they're going to come forward with this proposal.
And of course, I always throw this at Jackie at the end of the show. What is the thing that you're watching? What is the story that you're watching, either in the coming weeks or in the coming months, in your case, that might be interesting, that maybe isn't on people's radar right at the moment? I always put her on the spot. I'm glad I'm also putting you on the spot.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, lately, because I live in Ward 6, because I'm so close to the whole thing, that's all I've been thinking about is May 1st. What are they going to do with this council seat? But I think that it's very early in the election season, so it's this. We can't keep up we can't look at these issues and question the candidates between now and November. So that's going to I think that'll pick up steam later in the year. I don't know, Josh. How about you?
Well, in terms of Geneva, I think for me the big thing that I'm watching, or I think is most interesting, is the change and how it affects the way the remainder of the DRI process and the foundry cleanup. And some of the things have been going on for years. When you lose that institutional knowledge, the first thing I think about is if the wheels are going to fall off, they're going to fall off in the areas where you have those sort of long-standing projects that maybe people aren't paying as close attention to at the moment because they aren't capturing the same type of headline coverage. That's sort of where I would I think that's where I would encourage voters to pay attention, are those issues that have been long-standing issues. That's why I brought up Lakefront, because that's another one. For what felt like maybe a 2 or 3 month window, that was a really big thing, either last year or the year before that. But other than that, it's kind of slipped into the background. But when you talk to folks, like you mentioned, it doesn't seem like it's something that's in the background. It seems like it's something that's on the front of most people's minds. And that is, in my mind, that's sort of where the energy and the focus should probably remain. But I do want to give you a chance to let everybody know where they can find you, where all of your stuff is on social media, and, of course, how they can find the blog.
Well, they can find the blog at genevabeliever.com, and I'm also on Facebook at facebook.com/genevabeliever. Come on there and see what the stories are, and leave your comments and jump in the fun.
Yeah, it is fun. All right, appreciate the time. Thanks for coming up.
Thanks for having me, Josh.
All right, as always, thanks for listening. Look for the Debrief on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. I will be back next Friday. Until then, stay tuned to FingerLakes1.com for the latest headlines from around the region.